Hello everyone, my name is James and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you in detail exactly how to build and install dovetailed drawers. I hope you enjoy this episode. This is the second part in the series of my extreme miter station. I do have a very comprehensive set of plans available on my website in case you're interested. In the first episode, right before this, I left with the cabinet bases and the torsion box top completely done. And the first thing I need to do here is to go ahead and cut out this section to install my compound miter saw. It will drop down into the torsion box and hopefully leave me with a surface that is exactly flush from the top of the box to the table of the saw. Here I'm cutting angles out on both sides, which will allow my compound miter saw to open fully to about 50 degrees on the left and I think about 60 degrees on the right. This is what it looks like with both corners cut out to give me full swing of that miter surface. Unfortunately, I can't find the clip of me doing the final cut on both sides. Now it's time to start cutting out the drawer parts. I use Baltic birch plywood for all of these. I chose 1/2 inch Baltic birch, but there's no reason you couldn't choose 3/4 inch or even 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch plywood of another species would be fine as well. This part's just a little bit tedious, but all you have to do is keep track of your measurements, cut out all the pieces, and keep the drawer parts stacked together. And there they are, all stacked up. This represents the sides and backs only. I never cut the bottoms until I put these together and take an exact measurement. I use the Porter Cable 12-inch dovetail jig, and I have mounted a board permanently to it. This way I can just simply clamp this to my table each time I'm ready to use it. This is the 12-inch jig, and it happens to come with templates for both through dovetails and half blinds. Since my drawers are half blinds, I'll need to swap out the templates. Yeah, it's pretty easy to make this switch. Just loosen these two big screws here, and the template pulls out, and you just put the next one in its place. I've also written in Sharpie on each template which one is which, so that I don't have to figure that out again in the future. We got to make sure the screw clamps are loose enough to raise the template up to slide our board underneath. We can press the template down in place and just temporarily snug the screw clamps back up. The wheels in the back here are attached to this cam clamp, which will secure the piece before we start routering. Next, we'll slide the front one in behind the cam clamp there. We can spin these screw wheels down just a little bit tighter so that when we engage the cam clamp, it holds it snugly. Each time you switch board thicknesses, you'll have a little bit of adjustment to get it dialed in for what you're currently working on. Okay, we're getting closer. Now we want to make sure the board in front comes up flush to the bottom of the template. Then we'll slide the top board forward until it's flush with the other one. Just fidget with them for a little bit and you'll get them both lined up flush to each other and flush to the bottom of that template. We're not really concerned with where they are as far as to the left or the right of the jig just yet. Okay, so I'm going to grab one of my drawers here, the two sides and the front and the back, and I'm going to label it. This is drawer 7, so I've got 7 side, and then I've got 7 front and 7 back. Okay, so I've got my 4 pieces together here. I want to make sure the wording is going to be on the outside of the drawer. So I'm going to kind of put the boards in their orientation as if they were a drawer. I'll put the back to the back, the front to the front, and the 2 sides on the sides, and I'll make sure the wording is on the outside of the drawer body all the way around. Next, I'm going to lay the pieces down, maybe sort of in an exploded view here, making sure that all of the insides face up. And now I'm going to mark that which corners belong together. This is A, and that one is A. Up in this corner we've got B, and that's B. And the next corner I've got C, and that will meet with C. And in the last corner I've got D, which of course meets with D. Okay, so we're going to grab 2 of these and we're going to head over to the jig. I'm going to grab the 2 A's. Each time you do a cut, you're going to make sure that you have the 2 letters that match. Okay, I'm a big fan of notes. I put them right here on my jig. The sides are the tails, and the sides go to the front of the jig. So you can see this board is a side, which means of course it's a tail, and the tail board goes to the front of the jig. Okay, we know that board goes to the front, but which side faces the jig? We have notes right on the jig itself. It tells us that the outside surfaces of the board face the jig. Now we know what the outside was. When we laid it out, we said where our words are the outside. Therefore our words have to face the jig. Look, there's another note. Lets me know the half-blind tail goes there. Now to get started, we're going to put this board in place, slide it all the way to the left, and clamp it down. Now this is critical, so we need to look carefully. If it doesn't slide all the way to the left, our stop is probably been locked down. We've got to make sure we loosen our stop, push it all the way to the left, then put our board back in place, slide our board all the way to the left, and then we can clamp it down. Okay, now we want to do some spacing so that it looks nice. We can see that this board is really more to the left than to the right. We'd like the 2 ends of the boards to meet somewhere in the middle of 2 of those open slots. I'm going to take measurements on both sides and try to get them equal. I can see that it's a little bit bigger on the right, so I'm going to have to slide the board to the right. Unclamp it, slide it to the right just a little bit. Alright, now we'll take one more measurement, and this one's coming out to be about 0.450, if you can read that upside down. And I'll check the other one here. It looks like that is also 0.450. Pretty good. Now that we've got them the same, we're going to go ahead and slide this stop back over. This is the stop that's going to be used for every drawer that's this height. Then, of course, we want to clamp it down good and tight. Okay, time for the top board now. Remember, A has to match with A, and having the words means it's the outside. The outside has to face the jig. So it slides in just like that, and you can see the A is right adjacent to the A, just like every cut you make should be. You might notice how it's offset to the left. That little black stop block that we put in keeps those pieces offset by exactly that much. That's how the dovetails work. Okay, the top of this piece of plastic here is preset at the factory, and this tells us how deep we want our bit. I start just a little high and I dial it down until it just barely touches the surface. Okay, one last check and we're going to be ready to cut. If we take a look, there is a groove here along the top of our template. Now this groove has to be perfectly aligned with the seam between these two pieces of wood. That's going to tell us how far in our dovetail will cut. So we might need to loosen the brass screws in back so that we can slide our template forward or backward. And then of course the front screw will clamp it down to the brass screw. Just dial that back and forth a little bit while paying attention and you'll get it just right. This jig cuts so accurately that I usually don't even make test boards to cut with. I usually just dial it in like it says and cut my first drawer, and I'm usually just right on. Okay, we're getting ready to cut here. If you bought this Porter Cable dovetail jig, it comes with that silver collet that you see surrounding the bit. And that's what's going to guide us through these cuts. I like to make a light scoring cut first. This sort of minimizes the tear out, especially on plywood. Then we can go ahead and plunge into full depth and cut all the dovetails. Now I did have some tear out there. There's two reasons why that happens. I moved a little bit too quickly and I was trying to angle myself out of the way for the camera. But in reality, that really isn't going to show once the drawers are assembled, and I'll show you. So it's time to do a little bit of a test fit. We'll put these things together and see what they look like. You might notice once again here that A goes with A, and those are both on the inside, just like we drew in our exploded view. For some reason, plywood dovetails always take more persuasion than solid wood dovetails. I think it has to do with all the fibers. However, this one is shaping up to be a little bit tight. And that was right. It was a little bit too tight for me to hammer it home. Luckily, we've got notes right on the machine. For half-blind dovetails, you can see a looser joint tells us to raise the bit depth. A tighter joint tells us to lower the bit depth. So we're going to raise it. Okay, so I'm raising the bit down into the router there a little bit, and you can barely see it, but I just wanted to take it a tiny bit. I'll do a quick check, and I can see a little bit of air underneath it. It is absolutely no problem to re-put those boards back in because the template is set and the stop is set, so they're going perfectly. I'll recut them, and we'll test it again. And it looks like those are going together nicely. Okay, so we're going to keep working our way around the box. I'm going to put corner B in and match it up with corner B and just keep going. And there's B. Make sure once you get it slid in that you slide it all the way to the left up against that stop securely. This is definitely an option as well. If you use a cheaper grade of plywood as opposed to Baltic birch, they do tend to tear a little bit more. Sometimes tape can help that. And it looks like that one actually came out better. Not perfect, but it definitely came out better. For me, what I've always found is the key is to just go slow. And that looks like we've got a pretty good fit there too. One thing that I do is put all of the box sides from all of the drawers together as I'm building and going through in sequence. That kind of prevents me from getting any of them mixed up. And I just kind of store them that way until I get ready to cut the bottoms. Now this one I'm cutting a whole lot slower. We'll see how it comes out. Okay, it looks like this one is a perfect cut. And all those are the little fibers that I was talking about. They're always present on plywood, and I think that's why they make for a tight fit. And I'm trying, but it seems that my hand just is not nearly as good as that mallet. My daughter's helping me store them, and a good place to store them is where they go until we're ready to cut the bottoms. Okay, 16 drawers down. All the sides and fronts and backs and all the dovetailing done. So now it's going to be time to measure and cut the bottoms. You're going to want to make sure that your drawer carcass there is square before you take your measurements. I keep a little shop notebook with me at all times, and I write down all the measurements and everything that I'm doing, take notes as I go. Okay, now we get to take it apart. We do have to cut the dados in order to put our drawer bottoms in, and then we will cut the drawer bottoms. Okay, I've got a 1/2 inch dado set up in my saw, and I usually cut it a 1/2 inch up from the bottom. Your drawers certainly don't have to have half-inch bottoms, but I plan on putting a lot of heavy tools in mine, so I didn't really want to use quarter-inch ply. Okay, so there is one drawer all complete. And here is the whole stack of 16. I always tried to keep all of the drawer parts together with themselves throughout the entire process. Okay, time to cut out the bottoms. I've taken careful measurements. I've added some length and width to the measurements to account for my dado depth. And I'm doing all of the cuts out of half-inch Baltic birch plywood. And that's the entire collection of drawers right there, bottoms included. Okay, time to glue it together. So if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know that I am a big fan of applying glue liberally to every single surface. I like to get it on both sides of every surface and then wipe off the excess when I'm done. I suppose for me, if there's ever a failure in something that I build, it's not going to be from lack of glue or lack of screws. You do need to work fairly quickly here as you're gluing these up. There are some glues that might dry a little bit quick. I've always had good results with Titebond 3, however. Now I am going to go ahead and put glue in the groove all the way around. If I were dealing with solid wood drawers or a solid wood bottom, perhaps like a cabinet door front, a raised panel door, I would most certainly make sure that the panel floats to account for expansion and contraction. One more note here. On these plywood drawers, I am not going to clamp them together. I actually have designed them so they fit really tight. The glue in them makes them a little bit tighter. I just find that I finish them, square them up, and just let them sit to dry, and they stay perfect. I have actually built hundreds of drawers this way, and I have never once had a problem. It's important to not move them while they're drying, however. Okay, once they've dried overnight, I typically use a random orbit sander. I start with something pretty aggressive, like about 80 grit, and I just work my way down to about 220 grit. Whenever I sand plywood drawers, I make a habit of getting all of the corners very well. You get some pretty wicked splinters off of these corners if you don't sand them good. And there they are, 16 drawers ready to be put in. Jumping back to my miter station carcass there, I realized that I had not yet secured the torsion box top to the frame. It's pretty important to maintain complete flatness all the way across the entire top. You can put a long level on it and make sure it crosses over your miter saw table, and you can see if your gap is any bigger than the thickness of about a piece of paper. If it is, it's pretty easy to drive in a shim a little bit and then just screw that shim down and follow that up with a recheck of your flatness. If you use this method, it's pretty easy to get it flat to within the thickness of about a sheet of paper, and if you can do that, that is far more accurate than you'll ever need for your miter saw station. When I planned on embedding my saw into this torsion box top, I actually set it up so that it went a little bit deep. That way I could shim it up to get perfect flush. It is important when securing your miter saw to make sure that the miter saw fence is going to be parallel with the front of the miter station. If it's not, you're going to have a pretty funny looking miter fence when that's all said and done. All right, it is time to start mounting our drawers. I have cut a couple of spacers here, about 1/8 of an inch thick, in order to keep the drawer bottom up off of the bottom surface. This will just help the drawer to glide in and out better without sliding or dragging on the bottom. So I'm just going to pull the drawer out a little bit, keep the spacers underneath it, and pull the drawer slides forward. I want to make sure that the drawer slides are flush with the front of the drawer. I just use a squeeze clamp to hold the drawer slide in place, and I'll check and verify that it's perfectly flush with the front. Same thing on the other side. Just a little note on drawer slides. If you go to places like Home Depot or Rockler, you tend to pay quite a bit more for drawer slides than you do if you have a business. If you have a business, you can get them from a place called Worth, W-U-R-T-H, Worth Lewis and Company. They're online, and I think I paid about $5.50 for each pair of drawer slides here. So I basically just continue to pull the drawer further and further out and insert screws in each of the holes. And that's all there is to it. One drawer down. Most of the rest of the drawers went without a problem, but I wanted to show you this one. I made a mistake here, and this is a pretty common error when doing drawers. For my drawer slides, it tells me that my opening in my cabinet should be 1 inch wider than the drawer body itself. My drawer body, however, was 1 1/4 inches smaller. I'm cutting a couple of 1/8 inch shims to make up the difference, because if I tried to screw this together, the drawer would never open and close. I've put the drawer back in position, I've put the spacers underneath it, I've pulled the slides out, and now I'm kind of marking the location where the slides go on both sides. I want to extend those lines from the front all the way to the back. Then I'm going to take some double-sided tape and stick it down right in this area of the lines. This is basically right underneath where the drawer slides will mount to the drawer. I will use that tape to temporarily tack on the shim that I just cut. Now this tape isn't in any way going to be carrying the weight of the drawer. This tape is just holding the shim temporarily until the screws go in. The screws go all the way through the drawer slides, through the shim, and into the body of the drawer. Now I'm just going to cut the shim off flush with the back of the drawer. And I'm going to repeat that same procedure on the other side. This has the effect of now making my drawer 1/4 inch wider than it just was. So instead of me having to throw the drawer away, I've just repaired this project. The procedure at this point is the same as it has been for all the other drawers. I will put my spacers back in place underneath, I'll pull my drawer slides out, and I'll proceed through screwing them down. And we can see that the drawer now slides perfectly in and out. All right, now that's how to build dovetail drawers and install them. I hope you enjoyed this part of the video. And I really hope you'll come back to see the rest of this miter station build. Thanks for watching.